Welcome to Sports for Beginners. This is the show where I cover the Pittsburgh Penguins, Toronto Blue Jays, and take you on a journey through the world of sports. From the fan's perspective, here is your host, Scott McGregor. Let's have some fun. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Season 2 premiere of Weekly in Sports, the podcast. Apologies for the lighting here in my record, but that's okay. Today, we begin the second season of Weekly in Sports, the podcast. I'm your host, Scott. On today's show, we're talking about the Toronto Tempo. Their inaugural season has just been leaked, as has the entire WNBA season. We are going to focus mainly on the Tempo. Also, we will be talking about where the PWHL and the NHL stand in their standings at the Olympic winter break, which is currently on and underway. But it is important to note, before we get down to business, that the PWHL will return to action on Thursday, February 26, 2026. NHL will return a day before the PWHL returns to action on Wednesday, February 25th, 2026. At the time of our recording, it is Thursday, February 12th, 2026. This show will drop on February 26th, 2026, and it is our season opening end of the month show for Weekly in Sports. Without further delay, I want to also remind you, that we will be having the return of our shoutouts of the month or shoutouts of the week for Weekly in Sports. That coming later in our program. With that all being said, let's get right down to business. This is Weekly in Sports, Season 2, and let's get started. Our first opening segment of the show. This will be our opening segment for our February show. As you can see, we now have tempo.wnba.com/news up because we will be starting off our show talking Toronto Tempo. The year of the Tempo in basketball for the WNBA has arrived. Just a few quick things to note before we talk about the Tempo schedule, which will be revealed before we drop into our first commercial break of the show. At least the May part of the show will be revealed. It is important to note that on January the 15th, 2026, the Tempo announced assistant coaches Brian Langton and Sierra Carl. If I pronounced that wrong, I apologize to the assistant coaches of the Toronto Tempo, who are set to begin their inaugural season and their season opener against the Washington Mystics, if I'm not mistaken, on May 8th at Coca-Cola Coliseum, home currently of the PWHL's Toronto Scepters. But more about the Scepters a little later. Let's dive into the news surrounding the assistant coaches, Brian and Sierra. Let's dive in. This was posted at 1:01 p.m. on Thursday, January 15th, 2026. And both Sierra Carl and Brian Langton, I should say. There we go. I think I got it right. But if I pronounce the names wrong, I apologize. But they bring over 10 years of player development and coaching experience to the Tempo. The Toronto Tempo announced Wednesday, January 15th, 2026. Was that right, the time? Was that the right time? Let's go back into January for a second. Nope, that was on Thursday. So it was announced on the 14th, Wednesday, that the team has named Sierra Carl and Brian Langton as assistant coaches. Carl and Langton each bring over a decade of experience across both the NBA G League, WNBA, and NCAA, which is college basketball, and they will report to the inaugural head coach of Canada, your Toronto Tempo, Sandy Brondello. Coach Brondello said in a statement, "We are incredibly excited to welcome Sierra Carl and Brian Langton to the Toronto Tempo. As we build the foundation of this franchise, it's essential we bring in people who reflect the spirit and competitive culture of this city, and Sierra and Brian do exactly that. Sierra's player-driven, approach and sharp basketball mind will elevate our standard on the court from day one. Brian's on-court strategy, acumen, and commitment to high performance strengthen the entire organization. Their impact will be felt immediately as we shape what Tempo basketball stands for, and I couldn't be more energized about the direction we're heading with them on board. In their roles, Carl and Langton will support Brondello across all aspects of team preparation and performance, including player development, advanced scouting, and on-court strategy. Carl joins the Tempo from the Phoenix Mercury, where she served as an assistant coach and head video coordinator since 2023. She is currently working with the Women's Professional Basketball League, rivaled in Miami. Carl also brings collegiated coaching experience. Yeah, I think I have that right. Anyways, coaching experience from the University of North Texas, San Diego State University, Metro State University of Denver, and Cal Poly Ponoma, I should say, University. Brian most recently served as the head video coordinator and player development coach for the New York Liberty from 2023 to 2025, including the teams during the team's 2024 championship season. He also brings experience from the NBA and NBA G League, having worked in player development and basketball operation roles with the Sacramento Kings, Miami Heat, Indiana Pacers, and Sioux Falls Skyforce. General Manager Monica Wright Rogers said, "Sierra and Brian represent the type of excellence we're committed to building here in Toronto. Sierra brings a deep understanding of the women's game and a proven ability to connect with athletes in ways that unlock their best. Brian's operational acumen and forward-thinking approach will be instrumental as we grow into a world-class organization. Their leadership not only strengthens our team today, it sets the tone for the Tempo's long-term success. We're proud to have them joining us as we continue laying the groundwork for a franchise this city and country can be proud of." For more information about the Tempo, log on to tempo.wnba.com. If you want to know more about the Tempo, log on to tempo.toronto Tempo, one of the WNBA's most recent expansion teams and the first of its kind outside of the United States. On another episode of Weekly in Sports, we'll dive into the WNBA schedule in its fullest before we begin play, that is. But moving on, let's get to the inaugural schedule. And we're going to start in the regular season, which begins in the month of May, with the preseason beginning in just 2 months in April. So folks, later on in the show, I'm going to tell you about a few games that I am looking forward to for this Tempo team. I don't know if I'll be able to tune into as many of these games, but I'll tell you a few that I'll be looking forward to. And if I don't tune in, I'll at least try to keep my eyes on a couple players when the team roster comes out, that is, which I believe shouldn't be too far behind as we approach one of the final moments of the off season in the WNBA, which is the draft. So in May, the Tempo will be in action from May 8th to May 30th. They will face the Washington Mystics to kick things off from the Coca-Cola Coliseum. And then on Wednesday, May 13th, they will take on the Seattle Storm. Both of those games will be home games. They will then hit the road on May 15th and be on the road until May 21st, 2026, where they will take on the Los Angeles Sparks twice beginning on May 5th at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Of course, the games on Wednesday and Friday, May 8th and May 13th. Those games will be at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time against the Storm and 7:30 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time against the Washington Mystics is tip-off. Their first game against the Los Angeles Sparks will be at 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time on Friday, May 5th, with Game 2 coming on Sunday, May 17th at 7 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, both games from the same arena. Of course, if we look at the WNBA schedule, which we will later, a little later, we'll find out where everybody's playing, I'm sure. On May 19th, the road trip continues as the Toronto Tempo face the Phoenix Mercury. Game time 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And then they will have their first 8 p.m. action Eastern Daylight Time on Thursday, May 2026 against the Minnesota Lynx. They will end their May schedule on home soil against the Seattle Storm at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. Against the Chicago Sky, they will play on May 27th. That game is at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and that is on the road. The Seattle Storm is at 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, Saturday, May 3rd. One of their home games before the game against Chicago, and then another game at home against the Storm, will be against the Portland Fire. That game is on Saturday, May 23rd at 6 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And with that being said, that is your May schedule. We're going to take a timeout. When we come back to Weekly in Sports, it's time to talk latest around the PWHL and the NHL. Plus, we'll do shoutouts of the month. And just before we go any further into the women and men side of the ice, in the professional leagues, the PWHL and the NHL, I'll give you just 3 games this regular season, inaugural season for the Toronto Tempo in their opening month of May that I am looking forward to. And of course, if you want more extensive WNBA action, I've got some great news for you. I'm sure our friend of the show, former host of Locked On Kraken, but still working to give you some Kraken news, Erica Lindsay Ayala, will have you covered for the New York Liberty and, of course, other WNBA action across the WNBA. We'll also link in the description a link to her website, Black Rosie Media. All right, PWHL, NHL, where do we stand at the Olympic break? 3 games in inaugural season May schedule. I'm looking forward to in the Toronto Tempo inaugural season and shoutouts of the month when Weekly in Sports Season 2 continues.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down, nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
Hey, Pens fans. This is Scott McGregor, host of Sports for Beginners, On the Ice and Behind the Benches, and co-host of On the Ice and Behind the Benches, host of also Weekly in Sports, and many of the other programs on Sports for Beginners. Join me every week after select Penguins hockey games over the course of the week for Penguins Weekly Recap, a new kind of show airing weekly on Sports for Beginners. Next season, We wanted to try and do it this year, but we'll do it next season. That's Penguins Weekly Recap, coming soon to Sports for Beginners, the podcast. You won't want to miss it. See you there, Penguin fans.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Welcome back to Season 2, Weekly in Sports Podcast, Episode 1. Before we continue on, I'd like to tell you what our title of our episode is. Toronto Tempo's WNBA inaugural season begins in May. What's the latest news around the PWHL and more is our title for this premiere episode. Earlier in the show, we did a show overview as well as a quick little rundown of our segments, and we're right at our middle segment, which is the latest around the PWHL and the NHL, as well as we're going to go to shoutouts of the month. But before we get there, I promised you I would give you 3 matchups, just 3, that I am looking forward to this inaugural season when the Toronto Tempo hit the court for the very first time in the Professional National Women's Basketball Association. And when we talk regular season, we talk games, right? Well, 3 of the Tempo games that I am looking forward to include their first matchup with the Washington Mystics, which will be their home opener on May 8th, 2026. That should be a good one, regardless on who's on the team. We're going to know that before we get to March, and of course before we get to April, but we aren't going to know who makes the official team until probably end April, early May. One thing we do know is we know who the head coach is as of now, and we do know 2 of the new assistant coaches in the fold for Canada's first ever Women's National Basketball Association club outside of the United States. Second game, they faced the Washington Sparks twice. In particular, I'm looking forward to the first showdown. Because when we talk about firsts, we talk about the first time a team will meet. So why did I skip over the Storm? Well, because that's their second home game. Yeah, it's their first time they play the Storm, but I wanted to leave some time to run down also the road games. And the first 2 road games that they play are against the Los Angeles Sparks. I in particular am looking forward to the game on Friday, May 15th, although I will not really be able to watch this game because of the late time zone, even though it's in the daytime. I mean, maybe if it was 9 p.m., maybe I would be able to check in for at least an hour of the game. Of course, we don't know where it's being broadcast yet. We don't know where it's going to be broadcast. My guess would be TSN, maybe Sportsnet. I don't know what it's going to look like for Canadian viewers now that we have the Tempo coming into town. But this is going to be a feeling out process for Toronto fans, especially fans of basketball in general. I am looking forward to that game against Seattle on May 13th as well. But my 3 games that I'm most looking forward to are matchup number 1 against the Mystics, matchup number 1 against the Sparks, even though it's daytime. They're all under Eastern daytime timelines in the time zone, but that's besides the point. The other one I'm looking forward to is the game against the Mercury. Now, I get it. Both of those games against the Sparks and the Mercury, May 19th against the Mercury and May 15th against the Sparks. Of course, they will play the Sparks again on May 17th. Maybe I'll have a better shot at checking that one out live than I will the Night Owl games, but at least if I can check out one of those games, I'll get a feel for what is expected in this type of thing. But I feel like this inaugural season for Toronto Tempo fans is going to be a feeling out process. You'll get in the moment. Like it's going to be one of those, here are the new kids on the block against teams that are kind of new, but also have been around for a little while. Like, they know what they're up to. They know what needs to be done. All right, folks. As I mentioned earlier, my 3 games that I want to, sorry, not want to, that I'm excited or interested to see are the Mercury versus the Tempo on Tuesday, May 9th. The Tempo versus the Sparks on May 15th. And on May 8th, the Washington Mystics taking on the Toronto Tempo. I'm looking forward to those games. Those games I have circled, not necessarily on my calendar. I don't have a calendar for the WNBA, but that's fine. It's fine. But those are the 3 games I'm looking forward to. And I gotta tell you that I'm also looking forward to the action before before Toronto takes on the Los Angeles Sparks, which is against the Seattle Storm. But enough about basketball. Let's switch gears. We are coming up on our next break. We're gonna get through this briefly. It's time to talk about the PWHL and the NHL. We kind of don't have time to do our shout outs of the month, but we'll do that before we get into a little Super Bowl conversation coming up in our 3rd segment. So we'll do that on the other side. But very quickly here, and we're going to share the screen again. Now we're going to show hockey side of things. Here's where we sit at the Olympic winter break in the PWHL. Moving on. Here's where we are. Your 8 teams include Boston in the lead with 30 points. They have 10 wins, 2 overtime wins, 2 overtime losses, and 2 losses, I should say. So let me run that again. They are 10, 2, 2, and 2 for the entire season. They have 30 points. The Boston Fleet, that is. Defending Walter Cup champions are just 2 points behind them with a record 9, 2, 3, and 3. And they have 28 points. They, like the Montreal Victoire, have played in... Oh, want to make sure I'm not moving anything around. Have played in 15 games. The Toronto Scepters, Vancouver Golden Eyes, Ottawa Charge, and the New York Sirens. All 3 of those teams have played in 16 games in this 30-game season. So a couple of teams still have a couple of games to play as we sit here. I don't have it right now where we can show you the remaining games, but that is fine. The Montreal Victoire, speaking of the Victoire, however, who are number 3, they have played, like Minnesota, 15 games. And Boston and Seattle have each played in 14 games. Minnesota 2 points behind Boston at 30-28. Boston has a 4-point lead. I should say a 3-point lead. No, it's a 4. Yeah, let's go with a 4-point lead because let's see. 29, that's 1. If we count 30, that's 1. 29, that's 2. 28, that's 3. 27, that's 4. Yeah, 24-point lead for Boston over the Montreal team. Montreal with 27 points, Boston with 30. Montreal's record right now through 15 games is 10, 3, 0, and 5. The New York Sirens record, minus their points, which is 24. They have 24. Ottawa with 22. Vancouver with 19. Seattle 16. Toronto 17. In terms of points for the regular season. New York, who slides in at number 4, is 7, 0, 3, and 6 at the Olympic winter break. The Ottawa Charge, 9, 5, 0, and 7. They sit in 5th place in the PWHL standings. The Vancouver Golden Eyes sit in 6th place with a record 6. They have 19 points to Ottawa's 22. Toronto with 17 points. They have a record 5, 1, 3, and 8. Seattle is 5, 1, 2, and 7. And they, to Toronto's 17 points and Vancouver's 19 points, have 17 points through 14 games played. And Boston with 30 points through 14 games played. Minnesota and Montreal, 28 points for the Frost. The Victoire with 27 points. Sirens with 24. Charge with 22. Golden Eyes with 19. And we have Toronto and Seattle. Seattle with 16. Toronto with 17. All right, on the other side, along with our shout outs of the month and Super Bowl conversation on Weekly in Sports, we will touch on the latest around the NHL, specifically where we sit in the Eastern and Western Conference, as well as the wild card at the Olympic break. The NHL side standings, shout outs of the month, and Super Bowl champion, Seattle Seahawks. How did they get there? That conversation coming up on Weekly in Sports Season 2. Stick with us.
Take another look with Gerda Felix and Melanie Taddeo Malo, two powerful women of diverse backgrounds having genuine, unique, and uncomfortable conversations that everyone needs to have. Join Melanie and Gerda for conversations about what is missing from human connections.
Hi, Scott. It's Ali here. I just wanted to mention that I'm really enjoying the show and I'm really enjoying what you're putting together. And I wanted to just say I'm enjoying being a part of it as well. So please keep up the phenomenal work and make sure you guys keep this podcast going because it really suits you well.
It continues on Weekly in Sports Season 2 of the podcast. It's episode 1 of Season 2 of the podcast. Welcome in. I'm your host, Scott. You could follow me on Instagram, SMC_87_. I prefer it though if you emailed me at sportsforbeginners8231@gmail.com. You can also follow Weekly in Sports and Sports for Beginners on Facebook. Just search for the Sports for Beginners Facebook page and you will find updates on Weekly in Sports, Sports for Beginners, post-game shows that we do on Sports for Beginners, other great specials, and perhaps we'll share some news surrounding Sienna T Radio or the Ali Musa show. But wait a minute, wasn't the Ali Musa show called Broadcast Map and for a time all over the map? Yes, it was, but that's a question for Ali to answer. And speaking of Ali, you can catch up on all his shows, especially one that I, for one, am very excited to tune into, even though I don't cover it as much. But join us on the Ali Musa show at 4 p.m. Eastern, of course, time permitting as well, because it could change. But Tuesday next week, of course, by the time this show drops, that show will be done, but I'm just going to bring it up as we record here, as Ali discusses why is radio stuck. Who's he discussing it with? Log on to the alimusashow.ca to find out more. Again, that's the alimusashow.ca to find out more. This was formerly known as Broadcast Map. So log on to the alimusashow.ca to find out more, and perhaps you could find out a lot of great stuff, like for example the announcements. And with that said, it is time to take a look at the NHL. Our logo has finally shown up here on our screen. There we go. Now it looks more like a Weekly in Sports show. There we go. In Sports show. There we go. Now we're cooking. There we go. Anyways, there's still lots for us to get into, so let's keep it going. We talked about the women's side in basketball. We talked about the women's side in hockey. Let's go to the men's side of hockey. In particular, we're looking at the NHL. So yeah, we're not really looking at the latest in the NHL or in the PWHL as we wanted to, but we are looking at, in terms of latest, we are looking at the standings where we sit. And here we go with our NHL standings watch. Here's a look at the Eastern wildcard as we can attest to. We got here in the Atlantic Division, we got the 3 teams that are up there. We have the Tampa Bay Lightning, Montreal Canadiens, and the Detroit Red Wings sitting atop the Atlantic Division. Pittsburgh Penguins, Carolina Hurricanes, and the New York Islanders sitting atop the Metropolitan Division. And our wild card are the Boston Bruins and the Buffalo Sabres. The records as we speak: Tampa Bay entered the break with a record 37-14-4. Montreal with a record 32-17-8. The Red Wings have entered the Olympic break with a record 33-19-6. Pittsburgh entering with a record 29-15-12 at the Olympic break. Carolina Hurricanes with a record 36-15-6 at the Olympic break. The New York Islanders 32-21-5 at the Olympic break. The Buffalo Sabres at the Olympic break, they hold on to the number one wild card spot in the Eastern Conference. Their record is 32-19-6. The Boston Bruins, as we go into who's in the hunt in the Eastern Conference, they are the second place wild card holders with a record at the Olympic break of 32-20-5. Yep, you heard me. 32-20-5. Boston. That's Boston's record. In the hunt in the Eastern Conference for the wild card, we've got the Blue Jackets record 29-20-7. The Capitals 29-23-7. The Ottawa Senators sitting in number 5, 28-22-7 at the Olympic break is their record. The Toronto Maple Leafs are 6th in the Eastern Conference sideline as we go to teams now out of contention. Toronto's record going to the break for the Olympics is 27-21-9. Want to make sure I get that right. Philadelphia's record as they sit 7th is 25-20-11. The New York Rangers, who sit in the 10th spot, they are way out of a spot here. Well, they're going to need a few things to go right, especially getting some wins against the Pittsburgh Penguins. That'll do some good for them. Mind you, the Penguins and the Rangers do meet shortly after the Olympic break wraps up. But first, the Penguins will see the Devils. The New York Rangers record, though, is 22-29-6. The Devils record, which will change one more time before the Penguins meet the Devils after the Olympic break, is 28-27-2. Florida record 29-25-3. They are 8th place in the Eastern Conference wildcard standings. Let's move over to the Western Conference, shall we? Our top 3 playoff contenders in the Central, that is being led by the 37-9-9 Colorado Avalanche, the 34-14-10 Minnesota Wild right behind the Avalanche, and the Dallas Stars make up the 3rd spot in the Central, record 34-14-9 at the Olympic break. Minnesota 34-14-10 at the start of the Olympic break, I should say. Colorado with a record 37-9-9. Over in the Pacific, the leaders are the Vegas Golden Knights 27-16-14 at the Olympic winter break. Edmonton Oilers 28-22-8 at the Olympic break. And the wild card belongs to the Anaheim Ducks, who are the second wild card spot of the Western Conference. 30-23-3 is their record at the Olympic winter break. The Utah Mammoth are 30-23-4, and they hold the sole possession of the first wild card in the Western Conference. In the hunt and out of the hunt, will we see the 18-33-6 Vancouver Canucks in place number 10. The 9th place St. Louis Blues at 20-28-9. In 8th place, we have the Calgary Flames with 23 wins, 27 losses, and 6 overtime or shootout losses. Winnipeg's record of 22-26-8 is 7th in that 7th spot as far as the wildcard standings are concerned. The Blackhawks are in 6th place with a record 22-26-9. Winnipeg's record 22-26-8. San Jose record 27-24-4. Chicago with a record of 22-26-9. They sit 6th. And between them, San Jose, Nashville, and Los Angeles with records for the Kings of 23-19-14, 26, 24, and 7 for the Predators. And of course, for San Jose, 27, 24, and 4. Those are your standings in the Western and Eastern Conference. Colorado still has a pretty good big lead in the league, but Tampa Bay is right there behind them, as well as Carolina, Minnesota, Dallas, Montreal, Detroit, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Boston, making up your top 10 in the league. In the conference, Tampa Bay all the way down to Washington make up your top 10 in the Eastern Conference. Your top 10 in the Western Conference go from Colorado all the way to Nashville. I think it's time for some shout outs of the month. All right. This is what we call our podcast segment. And today, I should say this month, I have 4. Due to time constraints, we're going to go to 3 shout outs of the month, which can also include podcasts like the one I mentioned earlier, the Ali Musa Show. Ali also does a show with a good friend of his named Makara. Ali and Makara. If I pronounce the name wrong for Makara, I apologize. I truly do. Want to make sure that I get the names right, but definitely feel good to go check out the two of them together on the Ali and Makara. So Ali's got his own show, and Makara and Ali have their own show together. And of course, another big shout out goes out to one of the greatest people you will ever meet. In fact, she's how Ali, Thomas, and I got started doing podcasts. Want to issue a shout out to Melanie and her crew. If we didn't find the inaccessible voice in broadcasting course, which by the way I graduated from, but if we didn't have that, I don't think this podcast or Sports for Beginners would have even seen the light of day. Now, it's true, we're not a perfect podcast. We're trying to work through some of the ins and the outs, especially when it comes to copyright, which we are trying to be extra careful with as we go along. But we're making it through. We're trying to go through with it. And I want to issue a shout out to someone in my family by the name of Jim Grover. Jim is one of the men behind a Coburg radio station that I'm sure many of you may know about by now. If you don't, it is called Truly Local Radio. Northumberland 89.7 is the radio station that my good friend, family member, I should say, Jim runs. And that's a station that runs some great shows. And seeing how it is Valentine's Day this weekend as we record this, of course, this will drop after Valentine's Day, but that's besides the point. They have a giveaway going on. But I'll let you find out about that by going to their website, which we will link in the description of this episode. By the time it drops, however, it may not be as brought out as possible. Anyways, next up for our shout outs, let's see, we've done a shout out to Ali, a shout out to Makara, a shout out to Melanie, a shout out to Jim. That's 3 to 4 shout outs. Let's do one more, just one more. And that's going to be a shout out to the entire crew at Sienna T Radio. I know, Sienna, by the time this hits the air, your birthday will have passed, I should say. But I still want to shout you out regardless, because it is your birthday today. So happy birthday to you. And of course, I do encourage my listeners to not just check out this podcast, but also check out what Sienna's got cooking, especially this weekend. She's got some great content coming. And yes, life can get in the way of these content stuff, but perhaps there will be some time to check them out. By the way, Ali, Makara, and Sienna also run a program workshop called Tech Stravaganza. And I've had the pleasure to be a part of that before. That is also run by Samantha Ash, host of the Sienna T Radio Classical Cafe, Saturday afternoons at 2:30 to 3:30 p.m. Eastern. With that said, that will do it for our shoutouts of the month. If you would like to get in on the action, you can do so via the Discord server, the WhatsApp group. We will have something set up for you as the season goes on for Weekly in Sports Season 2. Ideally, we want to start in January, but our second season, I should say, is running as it begins here in February, which is completely fine. We technically like to do 11 months in a program, but we're also going to save some time to get a breather from the MLB All-Star break, which comes your way in July. So maybe we won't do a full year of weekly in sports. One thing's for sure, we do break at the end. We do end, I should say, at the point of December, but we'll take about a month off and then we come back in January. That's ideally the plan, but we'll see. Maybe we'll take January off and then just start things off in February. We'll see how everything goes. But anyways, it's time to talk Super Bowl. Yeah, I know. A lot of people were saying this was a snooze fest, and I got to agree. It was a snooze fest this year. But look, I'm not going to tell you how to fan. If you're a fan of the Seattle Seahawks, power to you. If you're a fan of the New England Patriots, power to you. If you're a fan of the Buffalo Bills, power to you. I'm not going to tell you how to fan. I'm not that kind of guy. What I will say is I felt both teams played pretty well. And again, to anyone who says that, the sport is rigged, I'm not saying I don't disagree with you because I don't. I would agree with you. But listen, it's the team's job to win the game. It's not the referee or the official's job, I should say, to win the game for that team that gets to win the Super Bowl or the Stanley Cup or the Walter Cup or the NBA title or the WNBA title. It's not their job. It's the team's job to do that. Okay? Anyways, our final score was 29-13. The Seattle Seahawks secured their second Super Bowl title in a long time in franchise history, and they did so this year in 2026. So all power to the 12, all power to the 12, as they were called in Seattle. Congratulations to the Seahawks. Bills Mafia, it just didn't go our way. And as a result, as you know from what you've been hearing as of late, that has been confirmed, by the way, after this season ended, the Bills parted ways with Sean McDermott. But listen, the Seattle Seahawks, the first time they won the Super Bowl, they beat the Denver Broncos. That was in 2014 when they won their first Super Bowl championship. And now they have clinched their second Super Bowl championship against the New England Patriots. Most of you may not remember that game in 2014 when the Seahawks finally did it. They finally won their first Super Bowl. But for those who may remember, you may remember that the Seahawks crushed the Broncos 43-8. They crushed the Broncos 48. Yeah, I wouldn't say they crushed. I wouldn't say they crushed New England 29-13. New England only lost by, what was it, like 16 points? Yeah, 16. Yeah, okay. 16 points? That's a two-score game. So it's not like it was a shutout, which, by the way, has never happened in the Super Bowl era. Could have changed this past Sunday. Yep. But by the time this drops, it'll be like 3 Sundays ago. But anyways, it could have changed because for the longest time, until Drake May and the Patriots started playing football, the way they were able to score points, it was looking like Seattle was going to blow the doors off of the AFC champions and the AFC East champions, New England Patriots, and just pull off the unthinkable that has never happened in the history of the Super Bowl. Because think about it. If this game ends 20-0 or 30-0, the Seattle Seahawks would become the first team in NFL history to win a Super Bowl like Super Bowl 60, which they did win, by the way, and congratulations to them. But if this game ended 20-0 or 36-0, or rather 29-0, as it was before, instead of 29-13, we're looking at history in Super Bowl 60. Could we see history in Super Bowl 61? Hey, if something happened once, there's absolutely no reason why it can't happen again. Perhaps we could see a Super Bowl shutout in some games. Maybe not Super Bowl 60, maybe not Super Bowl 59, maybe not Super Bowl 58, maybe not Super Bowl 57. Could happen in Super Bowl 61, could happen in Super Bowl 62. It could happen in any of these. All right, folks, we're just about done here. But before we go, after this commercial break, we're going to talk about what's coming up elsewhere around our podcast, as well as preview the end of the month March show. Spoiler alert, spoiler alert, spoiler alert. That show will be pre-recorded. And spoiler alert, we could have some WWE conversations, as well as what fans can expect in the 2026 MLB regular season. By the time we record the show and get it out to you, it will be game time in the regular season. So we'll talk some MLB, WWE, as Elimination Chamber is in 2 weeks from Saturday. The Royal Rumble was last month, and Elimination Chamber 2026 is coming up. So perhaps we'll do an Elimination Chamber rundown and a couple of notes on the game, on the matches, as well as who is headlining WrestleMania. And of course, we'll talk some PWHL and NHL. And you know what? I wanted to take the break, but we just jumped right into it. So we're going to go ahead and take the break. And now that we've talked about what's next time on the show, when we come back from the break, it's time to talk coming up around the podcast as we conclude episode 1 of season 2 of Weekly in Sports. So be sure to stick with us.
CNT Radio will never give you up. They will never let you down, nor will they run around or desert you. So join Nick Astley for The Melting Pot every Saturday on CNT Radio. Hang on a minute. He's not Nick Astley. Oh, jings, I've done it wrong. Anyway, just join Nick for The Melting Pot on CNT Radio.
All right, folks, back with you on Weekly in Sports for just another 15 minutes or so. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We have kind of gone a little over our timeline as I had put out in a script, or not really a script, but in a construction, but that's okay. As we mentioned before the break, on the end of the month March show, we will be talking Major League Baseball, specifically around the Toronto Blue Jays. And this just in case you missed the news yesterday, Chris Bassitt has signed a deal with the Baltimore Orioles. So he is no longer a Blue Jay as we speak, as the Orioles and Chris Bassitt agree to a 1-year deal per Jake Reel of MLB. It is worth 18, and as he reports from Sarasota, Florida, the first spring training workout for the Orioles pitchers and catchers took place on Wednesday at Ed Smith Stadium, but President of Baseball Operations Mike Elias hadn't ruled out making an addition to his roster and remained tapped into the free agent / trade markets in pursuit of upgrades, particularly on the pitching role. Because of that, a new pitcher will be reporting to O's camp in the near future. Right-hander Chris Bassitt has agreed to a 1-year deal worth $18.5 million with Baltimore, according to a source. At the time this report was made, the club has not confirmed the deal, which is pending a physical. So if Chris Bassitt fails his physical, I don't think he will, but if he does, then the Baltimore Orioles will not see Chris Bassitt report to Orioles camp in Sarasota, Florida. Bassitt is receiving a $3 million signing bonus and can earn $500,000 in incentives if he starts 27 games per a source. Entering his 37-year-old age season, Bassitt has proven he still has plenty left in the tank in recent years. The righty recorded a 3.96 ERA in 32 games, 31 starts for the Blue Jays last season. then allowed only 1 run in 8 2/3 innings over 7 postseason relief appearances during Toronto's run to the World Series. Bassitt had a 3-year stint with the Blue Jays, posting a 3.89 ERA in 96 games, with 95 from 2023 to 2025. He's previously pitched for the White Sox, the A's from 2015 to 2021, and Mets in the 2022 season. He pitched for the White Sox in 2014, pitched with the A's at that time, formerly known as the Oakland Athletics. Now they're called the Athletics. As we went into seasons 2021 and then into 2022, he played with the New York Mets. And over his career, Chris has a 3.64 career ERA over 232 games, 218 starts. Those are pretty insane numbers. Anyways, Chris Bassitt took to social media after the trade and said, or after the signing rather, and said, "To all of Canada, I am beyond grateful that my family and I chose to come 3 years ago, from having our youngest son there to getting to a World Series and everything in between. It was filled with love and friendships, I should say, that my family will cherish for the rest of our, as it continues, lives. We gave you everything we had. Y'all gave us so much more. Thank y'all for literally everything." That was Chris Bassitt's statement, and in a picture that he posted on what they now call X, but I still call Twitter, and will continue to call it Twitter for the rest of our lives. We gave you everything we had. Y'all gave us so much more. Thank y'all for literally everything. Those are the words of previously number 40, the Hound on the Mound for the Toronto Blue Jays, Chris Bassitt. And with that said, we also got some news in our good buddy Keegan Matheson, who covers the Blue Jays. Apparently, José Berríos issued an apology and is ready to turn the page on the 2025 season controversy. According to Keegan, after an uncomfortable ending to his 2025 season, José Berríos opened the new year with an apology. Late in the Blue Jays' 2025 World Series run, Berríos left the team and returned home to Puerto Rico. He was on the IL and would not have factored into the series, but this still caused some unwanted attention and a potential strain on his relationship with the organization, particularly after GM Ross Atkins said Berríos was not happy with the situation. On Thursday, the old Berríos was back. This was reflective of Berríos eager to move forward, but understanding that he needed to address what had happened. Berríos said in a statement, "I made one bad decision to go back home, to keep working on my rehab and stay close to my family. At that moment, I wasn't pitching and I wasn't feeling great. I wanted to be close to my family. I didn't bring them to Canada because they were going to miss days in school, so I thought of that. I apologize. Maybe I made a bad decision to go back to my home." I don't think it was a bad decision at all. I don't think this was a bad decision at all. As you stated, and I'll read this again from the quote, "At that moment, I wasn't pitching and I wasn't feeling great. I wanted to be close to my family. I didn't bring them to Canada because they were going to miss days in school, so I thought of that. I apologize. Maybe I made a bad decision to go back to my home." I don't think that was a bad decision at all. I don't think it was bad. I really don't. Jose, you made the decision. I understand why you would make the decision, but I mean, dude, you weren't feeling great, you weren't pitching, so choosing to go back home, even though you wouldn't have factored into the most biggest series of the MLB season and probably of Blue Jays franchise history, where we were so close to winning our first championship since 1993 and 92. By the way, I wasn't alive for those years, but anyways, I don't think, Jose, you made the wrong decision. I think you made the decision that was best for you and was best for your family. I don't think it was a bad decision. I really don't. All right, coming up around our podcast, well, our post-game shows for hockey, for the PWHL and the NHL are on pause until the end of the Olympic winter break. We will be returning this baseball season with lots of in-depth conversations surrounding the Blue Jays and the entirety of the MLB on Sports for Beginners Season 5. Plus, want to issue some notes here. I know Thomas is eager to get back to Season 2 of On the Ice and Behind the Benches, but there's a lot of post-game stuff that we have to take care of on the Ice and Behind the Benches. So be patient with us as we will try to get Season 2 of that show on the right foot and getting into Season number 3. We will try to get it on the right foot. As for the next time on our show, I almost forgot. I do believe at some point today, we will get an update from Sienna on upcoming content coming up on Sienna T Radio. But I believe we got some great content ahead on Saturday and Sunday. Well, rather Saturday. They don't go on Sunday, but they do it on Saturday. They don't really go on Sunday, but that's okay. It doesn't matter. Anyways, one keynote I will make. Ali has a show on Tuesday, February 17th. He'll probably have some more shows by the time this drops, but hopefully you'll be able to attend those shows. And as for our next one, this will be pre-recorded the week of March 26, 2026, and it will drop. Yes, it will drop the night before opening day in the Major League Baseball season. We'll talk Blue Jays, maybe some WWE, definitely some PWHL and NHL, but the show comes your way March 26, 2026 as episode 2 of season 2 of Weekly in Sports kicks off. That will be pre-recorded between March 23rd, March 20th. It may even be recorded a week or 2 weeks before then, but you never know. As for this show, that is going to do it for our February 26th show, being recorded 2 weeks from the February 26th timeline, 2 weeks ahead. I am your host, Scott. Thank you so much for checking us out here on Weekly in Sports. We really appreciate it. If you're interested in learning about Weekly in Sports, we do have a website up. Please log on to the following site, https://weeklyinsports.wordpress.com. Podcast announcements coming first on the website, or maybe sometime they'll come first on Facebook, and they'll definitely be added to the Discord and WhatsApp group chats as well. You can also send us an email, sportsforbeginners8231@gmail.com. And if you do know me and you do listen to this show, you can find me on Instagram at smc_87_. Only if you know me. Only if you know me. I'm also on Mastodon, but I don't use it regularly, and I'm also on what they classify as X. I call it Twitter at Scott McGregor 3. But with all that being said, that is it for us. I'd like to thank you so much for joining us. That is going to do it for this episode of Weekly in Sports, the podcast. It really means a lot to me that you are all listening/watching the show, and I hope to see you all again real soon. My name is Scott, and this is Weekly in Sports. We'll see you next time. Thank you so much for listening to Sports for Beginners. If you would like to learn more about the show, you can visit the podcast Facebook page or visit the official website. You can also send us an email at sportsforbeginnerspodcast8231@gmail.com. As we always remind you, it is not goodbye, it is until next time.